what we try to do, which is get beneath the surface and figure things out. Now, granted, most of what I work on with my colleague Steve Levitt is much less inconsequential in actual business. So I got to tell you, I'm probably got nothing to tell you tonight that's of any value at all in the business sphere. I'm not just lowering expectations. I mean it. I'm here to tell you some stories that I find intriguing, maybe entertaining, and maybe you'll take something from it. Let me begin with an experiment. Let me see by show of hands. Raise your hand if, after you use a public restroom, you do not wash your hands. Go ahead.
Oh, no.
I know, after you do. All right, so let me say this. When I look out at you guys tonight, I see a bunch of accomplished folks, fairly hygienic, but I know that a bunch of you are lying to me, especially because you're mostly men. And I know you're lying because there's actually a good bit of data on this very topic, which is the number of people who say they practice hand hygiene and the share of them that actually do. I actually gathered some of these data myself. So this is a little bit of the data talk, right? What you want to know is the difference between what people say and what they do. So the way I gather my data is in airport restrooms. I like to, when I get off a plane, if I need to use the restroom, I'll do so, wash my hands, and then at the sink, afterwards, I just kind of linger for a while, and I just take note of the number of men who are coming out who've used the toilet and whether they wash their hands or not. I carry a handy-dandy notebook, and what I see is that on average, about 70% of the men who use a toilet in an airport restroom wash their hands, and 30% don't. Now, you could say, who cares about the 30%? Who cares about the non-wash? If I were from the Centers for Disease Control and I'm worried about avian flu or whatnot, I might care a lot, but I don't care about them. But here's my point. If you bring the 30% of the non-washers in here and sit them among people they know, like, maybe even dislike, colleagues, customers, they're not going to raise their hands either, right? The circumstances under which a question is asked, or more broadly, the circumstances under which data are gathered, has a lot to do with how reliable those data are. We're all making decisions all the time based on data, some of which we gather, some of which we trust other people to gather. But it's very, very hard to make sure that those data are not polluted, to make sure that the data represent the real world, to make sure that the data represent what people do and not what people say they're going to do. Economists have language for this. They call it declared preferences, what people say they're going to do, how they say they'll invest in a project, how they say they'll behave under certain circumstances, and your revealed behavior, which is what you actually do. Now, if you go back to the hand washing for a minute, you might say, well, who cares again about those 30%? But let's say you are the CFO of a hospital, all right? All of a sudden you care a great deal about how people wash their hands. If you look at U.S. hospitals every year, there are about 100,000 preventable accidental deaths in hospitals from causes other than the reason someone came in the hospital to not die from in the first place. Okay? So first of all, bad business model. A customer comes to me to not die, and I end up killing 100,000 of them from something else entirely. The single biggest culprit is bacterial infection. The single easiest, cheapest way to cut down on bacterial infection is washing your hands better. We've known this for 150 years. Of all the people who are in a hospital in a given period, doctors, nurses, patients, who do you think is the single worst category of hand hygiene? Right. Nurses are the best. Doctors are the worst. Okay? So what's interesting here is that most problems that we try to solve in society when they involve risky behavior, we figure that we can educate people out of the problem by teaching them the risk. Doctors, however, have the most education of anybody in the hospital. So plainly, it's not working. What do you do if you want to fix this problem? So let me tell you the story of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, which had a hand hygiene rate among its doctors of about 60%. So that's worse than even you guys in an airport, and that's the doctors before they interact with patients. So plainly, this is a life and death thing. You want to solve this problem. The first thing that Cedars-Sinai did is they did what we in America love to do because we know it works so incredibly well. They formed a committee. It was called the Cedars-Sinai Chief of Staff Hand Hygiene Advisory Committee, or Chichis-the-Hing for short, it was called. And there were about 20 members of the hospital staff on this committee, and they got together and thought, all right, how do we get our message across to the docs? They're adults, we're adults, we probably share incentives. Why don't we issue a really strongly worded memo? Just tell the doctors they need to improve behavior to 100%, and we'll sit back and watch the needle move. The way the hospitals tell